Hello, dear colleagues again. I think we are ready to start now. Today's session will be moderated by Leandre from UNECA. Leandre, please, you have the floor to start the moderation for today's sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippe. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning to those who are before East African time. Good afternoon to other participants. Welcome to this second day of this regional training on the National Strategy for Development of Statistics and the Advanced Data Planning Tool. We started yesterday this training, and I want to inform participants who were not with us yesterday that we had the opening remark from François Fontenot from Paris21 and also from Leila from the African Union Commission. After the overview of the work program made by Philippe, we had 4 presentations. The first presentation was on the promise of share result framework, national development plan, regional and international development agenda, and the statistics. Philippe, who was the presenter, talked about data demand arising from the global, regional, and national agendas. He highlighted the impact on thematic concern, systems, resources, and capacity, and the need to explore and develop data ecosystem. So 3 questions were asked by Philippe at the end of the presentation, and our conversation and the discussion was guided by these 3 questions. The second presentation was on the role of data user in the NSDS design and implementation. This presentation highlighted the need for a culture shift and the need to put the user at the center of official statistics. The discussion allowed countries to share their experiences on user engagement practices. The third presentation made by STATAFRIC was on the African Union initiative supporting the African statistical system to respond to data demand. The presenter called for a data-driven NSDS in the framework of the second strategy for harmonization of statistics in Africa and to support the 2063 agenda. The last presentation made by Julia from Paris21 was on the NSDS and new approaches to capacity development 4.0. Why does it matter? Julia, in the presentation, explained the association between NSDS and the capacity development. She also briefly talked about the capacity development, the CD 4.0 approach, and the NSDN framework. So today, we focus on module 2, which is the overview of the NSDS process. We will have 2 presentations from institutions, from Paris21 and STATAFRIC, and also 2 presentations from Cameroon and Uganda. Note that this is a training session, so feel free to ask questions after each presentation by requesting the floor or writing them in the chat box. As we are now starting this session with the first presentation, I kindly ask all the participants to mute their mic to avoid interferences. Also, if your internet bandwidth allows, please turn on your camera. We want to see your beautiful faces and the background. May I also ask you to add the name of your countries or institution in front of your name. That will help us to see who comes from where. For instance, of mine, I'm going to modify, put my write mine like as follow: ECA and then Leandre. Maybe I can do it right now. So you can also do it on your site. You only have to click on participant and select your name and modify. You put your, if you come from an institution, you put a prefix, you prefix your institution or prefix your country. So mine is now ECA Leandro Gogang. I'm now calling Philippe from PARIS21 to present the NSDS life cycle. As this session will take an hour, Philippe will pause after each phase of the life cycle to allow a participant to ask questions or make comment. Philippe, you have the floor.
Great. Thank you very much, Leandre. Just trying to connect to share my screen. Just a minute. Sorry for this. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. As Leandre highlighted, I'm going to talk about the NSDS process using the new NSDS Guidelines 3.0 that were prepared and updated by PARIS21. And we go through the life cycle of the NSDS, the way it has been restructured. And then we will discuss the challenges that we encounter when we develop the NSDS. So the outline is about, first of all, reminding you on the NSDS concept and the rationale and benefits that you all know already. And then I will walk through in details the NSDS Guidelines 3.0, and then highlight the challenges, the key success factors of the NSDS, and then we can discuss. But as Leandre already said, please feel free to ask questions when we will be presenting. And this maybe can help us to understand better and contribute on the presentation. Now, the rationale of the NSDS, you all know that the NSDS is a framework, it is a process, but it is also a product. It is a framework. Why? It is a framework because it allows required statistical improvement to be well planned. It allows national statistical systems to identify the key activities, the capacity development needed, and the infrastructure that is needed to improve the national statistical system. And all this is organized in a kind of result framework where the NSDS provides the indicators that are intended to be achieved. It is also a process, as you know. You know that the good NSDS process indeed put together all the stakeholders of the national statistical system. And it is an approach which enables coordination, ownership, leadership, and participation between stakeholders of the national statistical system, and this time taking into consideration the new data ecosystem environment, but also factors like technical and financial. So when the NSDS is well organized and engage all stakeholders, then the process will be a success. And I would emphasize here that before we get a product, which is the NSDS document, we should really take care of the process, because the process itself has an impact, one, on the development of the NSDS in terms of coordination, in terms of ownership, in terms of engagement of the stakeholders. And at the end, it is a product, because you have a shared document which shows or gives the vision of the statistical development, but also provides a strategic framework for statistics development, and also a detailed and costed annual action plan, which covers not only the National Statistical Office, which coordinates the process, but also the sectors that are involved in the national statistical system. Well, sorry, I'm trying to, good. I'm sorry, I'm struggling with my presentation, my slides here. Now, the NSDS, as we saw yesterday, it aligns with the national, regional, and continental and global development agendas. But most importantly, it helps to support the monitoring of the implementation of those policies. So all the policies define the framework, the result framework, what they intend to achieve, and also the indicators for monitoring. So the NSDS, if it is well designed, as we saw yesterday, it has to be aligned with the data demand from these policies. Second, the NSDS promotes the integration of statistics in development policies and governance process. How? When the policies are developed, they should take care of the statistics development itself, because if decision makers need to work or need to evaluate the implementation of the policies based on evidence, then statistics should be considered as a sector in the development policy. Also, when you develop your NSDS, you should take into consideration what is required, what is demanded in the development policy. So it is two ways integration. Of course, during the process, the NSDS ensures also participation, inclusiveness, by mobilizing and linking stakeholders and partners in the data ecosystem. When stakeholders are not involved in the preparation of the NSDS, I think we will not expect them to be involved in the implementation, because at the end of the day, the NSDS will not be necessarily responding to their demand. But also, the NSDS supports the statistical capacity development. As we saw yesterday, the whole process of the NSDS include capacity development, but also the implementation. We take care of how do we develop the capacity of the national statistical systems at the level of the system itself, the organization and institution, but also at the individual levels. So we can see it within the NSDS. We can see it across the data ecosystem by including the new actors also in the NSDS, like the private sector, the civil society organizations, and the academia, and so on. Now, I will walk you through the NSDS guidelines now. And as you can see, this is just the first page, the landing page of the guidelines. I will give you at the end the link to it, but just to highlight that the new updates of the NSDS guidelines provide knowledge and landmarks for the NSDS preparation. That's the most important mission or purpose of the guidelines. Also, it helps governments to design statistical development strategies, drawing lessons from statistical systems across the world. And here I'll show you later how the practices from countries and also other guidelines are incorporated in these guidelines and can be used to improve each country's NSDS development. But they are also useful for government statisticians, policymakers, and strategic planners to understand how statistics and data are important in all areas of the government, but also even beyond. So it will help to make the case for the importance of statistics, why the statistics should be taken on board as an important sector for the development of the country. Of course, the guidelines also, you will see that are organized according to a new NSDS life cycle, which is structured according to stages, phases, and several steps that whoever is developing the NSDS should take. When we were updating these guidelines, we consulted users, and users reviewed several times the guidelines. I should mention here that we also have a reference group, which is composed of countries, regional organizations, and independent statisticians who guide and approve the guidelines. So it went through the whole process, and today we are now at the end of all the updates, and shortly we will share with you the link to the guidelines. Now, the NSDS, as I said, the NSDS is structured according to a life cycle, as you can imagine. We have the life cycle here, which is structured into 3 main stages. And within each stage, we see what are the phases, and within the phase, each phase, we will see what are the steps and what is required. So it is a holistic process, of course, and it goes from the preparation stage to the design stage and the deployment stage, which is the implementation. Now, I will take you through each stage. And the first stage, which is the preparation stage, you can see already that the preliminary stage has two phases. The first phase is how do you engage stakeholders before you can start preparing your NSDS. The following stage, the following phase will be how do you prepare for designing the NSDS. Why do we start actually from engaging stakeholders? First of all, if you don't have stakeholders with you to develop the NSDS, then the NSDS will likely be just a document which is known by just those who did develop it. And its implementation will be a big issue. So on the engagement or engaging the stakeholders, we have to develop a policy document which actually states the importance and the why of the NSDS. We will develop the roadmap and also develop the advocacy materials, the advocacy program, and then we go to the preparation, the institutional preparation framework. Let me go into more details for the engagement of stakeholders. Well, even before you develop or you prepare your NSDS, you need a support from decision makers, policy makers, politicians, so that you have all of them on board and you have their support. If you don't have policy makers' support, it will be extremely difficult to implement your NSDS. Now, you need to develop a policy document, and this policy document is just a statement of the government which recognizing the need for statistical development and actually announces the formulation of the NSDS and calls for cooperation and engagement of all relevant stakeholders, including ministries and departments and agencies, as well as other stakeholders. And this document should be a brief document just to engage the policymakers in the process and call for participation of all other stakeholders. Second, once you have the support from stakeholders, from policymakers, you need to develop the roadmap. And this roadmap is an action plan to design the NSDS and should not be confused with the NSDS document itself. It's just a plan on how step by step are you going to design your NSDS. So it has to be a very coherent framework and should be developed with the participation of stakeholders so that they know what you will be doing. Of course, the whole process is coordinated by the NSO, and we will see later how the coordination unit or the coordination committee will be composed. And then once you have the the roadmap established, then you develop the advocacy materials for the NSDS. It's very important that the NSDS design is known by stakeholders. And for you to make it known, you have to develop an advocacy program so that all the government is aware, but also all other stakeholders in the data ecosystem and development partners know that you are developing the NSDS. So the advocacy is key. Now, second phase is the preparation. And here the preparation is much more institutional preparation. And it just asks you to put in place an institutional framework to design your NSDS. And this calls for appointing the NSDS coordination team, a steering committee, and technical working groups. This is key because sometimes the NSDS is developed by the National Statistical Office in their closed space, their closed offices, and the other MDAs are not consulted, the users are not involved, and other data ecosystem stakeholders are not involved in the preparation. And at the end, the implementation of the NSDS becomes an issue. So the NSDS coordination team should be composed of the NSO as a coordinator, of course, because the NSO being the coordinator of the NSS, but should be comprised of delegates or focal points from other national statistical offices, national statistical systems institutions. The steering committee is overseeing the design and the implementation of the NSDS, and this should be composed of the high-level officials in the national statistical system to guarantee the inclusiveness of all stakeholders, but also make sure that the data demand is taken on board to ensure that the NSDS is user demand driven. And then you know that in the NSDS, we have sectors, we have subnational levels, we have other special themes that are involved. And there we need technical working groups who really knows the details, the technicalities of each specific themes or specific area of the NSDS, which will be, the statistics area, which will be included in the NSDS. Once you have the institutional framework set up, it is very important that the NSDS process is launched. And it should be launched by the high-level authorities to make sure that this is supported by the whole government and should include all key stakeholders so that they are on board, they know what the NSS is doing. And then it's also very important to organize a special training on how to design the NSDS for the NSS, the NSDS Coordination Committee. And this should include, of course, other stakeholders like users and development partners. So this is the first stage this is how basically it should be organized. So Leandre, I don't know if you want me to go through the second stage or if we can have some questions already from the first stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippe. I think there's a question in the box. In this phase, do we need some kind of stakeholder analysis to understand well the stakeholders? So it's a question from Abdirahman.
Yes. Of course, during your design of the roadmap, you should have an idea of the stakeholders. But the in-depth assessment of stakeholders will come during the assessment of the NSS phase. And that is in the second stage. But we should already know or do the mapping, the initial mapping of the stakeholders of the National Statistical System, and including users and partners, development partners, so that they are involved at the stage of preparation already. But the in-depth in terms of data needs, that will come later during the design stage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Philippe. I don't know if someone has a question to ask at this stage before we move to the design stage of the NSDS. So I don't see any hand raised. So I think you can continue, Philippe.
Thank you. The second stage is the design. Once we are set, already we have the preparation phase where the preliminary stage already well designed. We have all the stakeholders on board. We have the policymakers supporting us. Then comes the design stage. And this design stage is really critical. And it has three main phases. First of all, you have the assessment of the NSS. You have to develop the vision of the NSDS, the vision for the NSS. You identify the strategic goals and key outputs. And then, based on the identified strategic goals and key outputs, you develop your multi-annual action plans and also cost the multi-annual action plans, develop the financing strategy. And of course, here you will see that the NSDS goes beyond just the NSO action plan, but should include the sectors, should include the subnational levels and other subject matters, specific areas that are priority for the country. Let me just go to the first stage. The first phase of this stage, which is the assessment of the NSS. This is critical. It's critical because all other elements will be based on the assessment of the National Statistical System. And the objective is actually to understand what are the data gaps, what are the issues and challenges, not only in data production, but also the data governance. What are the gaps? And here, I would just recall what Leandre presented yesterday by saying that it has to be user demand oriented. That's why the data gaps analysis is extremely important. And you will see tomorrow that ADAPT tool is there to help to how data gaps is analyzed from what is demanded from policy documents and what is provided or supplied by the National Statistical System, and what is the gap and how the gap should be taken on board. But the assessment also should look at, as I was saying, the user demand, but emphasizing the quality of data and statistics that should be produced. The assessment of the NSS should not be limited to the NSO, nor to the MDS. It has to embrace also all the sectors as much as possible, but also look at other subject matters and subnational data demand. This is huge, of course, but we see how this should be prioritized given the priorities in terms of data that are expressed in those respective policy data demand. So the assessment should cover mainly the following dimensions: the data which are demanded by users. So how do we satisfy the data users? It means that we have to discuss with them, understand what are their data needs, and also how we can present the data in a way that they are satisfied by the data produced by the National Statistical System. So this includes the data gaps analysis, but also the statistical output that we produce. We should look at the quality of the data that is produced. And here, most of the countries have developed already their quality assurance framework based on the UN National Quality Assurance Framework Manual. And this can help you to understand what are the quality issues and how can you improve the quality. But also, and very importantly, the NSDS capacity. What are the capacity constraints here? And how should you overcome the challenges? And the capacity development should be assessed in a holistic way, as what we have seen already yesterday with Julia's presentation on the CD 4.0. The assessment should be systemic, institutional, organizational, but also touching the individual levels. The assessment should also touch upon the infrastructure, the governance mechanisms, the financing constraints, and how the NSDS should actually effectively operate. Now, you have a lot of tools and some of the tools are already involved in the guidelines. And at the end, you should be able to have all the stakeholders on board, because this involves, the assessment involves consultation with key stakeholders. And at the end, when you have the assessment report, it has to be validated by all stakeholders, including the users, because here you need the ownership of the NSDS. And then before you design it, because it will be based on the results from the assessment, Then the assessment outputs, the assessment findings and recommendations should be validated by the stakeholders involved. Now, sorry. Once you have done the assessment, the following phase is to develop your vision, your goals, your strategic objectives. The vision is, of course, a medium-term strategic vision for where do you want to go to improve your statistical system, to develop your statistical environment. And this should be based on what has been identified in the assessment phase. And to meet the vision you have, to develop your mission, and then based on your mission, you develop your framework and your result framework, which is actually identifying the strategic objectives and key outputs. And once you have developed your vision, once you have elaborated your strategic framework, you need to make sure that, again, your stakeholders are on board and understands and agreed upon the vision, the strategic objectives, and the key outputs. Remember that these are based on the identified assessment findings and recommendations. Fine. The next phase is how do you elaborate the action plans? This is very important, and this elaborates the strategic objectives that you have already defined. And this, of course, as you know, it is an annual action plan, which covers sectors, subnational levels, and also other topics, cross-cutting topics that you might find important to include. I want to emphasize here that the annual action plans should be developed to respond to the implementation of the strategic objectives that you have already defined, which were defined based on the assessment. Once you have developed these action plans, including all relevant sectors, you now need to cost the actions that has to be implemented. And once you have your budget, then it is important to define the funding strategy or the financing strategy. How are you going to implement the NSDS? How are you going to finance the implementation? So it is extremely important to develop the financing strategy based on your action plan, based on your strategic objectives. But also, and very importantly, you need to develop a risk mitigation strategy. There are risks that are identified and they are based on several factors. It can be socio-economic factors, could it be public health as what we are experiencing now with the COVID-19, could it be others, could it be specific to the NSS, like the legal framework, could it be lack of accessing appropriate technology for data production, dissemination? Could it be also the role of the NSS capacity, the NSO capacity to coordinate the national statistical system? Could it be also the lack of relationship with other stakeholders, including development partners? So all the risks should be identified and also come up with risk mitigation. The NSDS should have an M&E framework, and the M&E framework for the NSDS should define how you will monitor the implementation of the NSDS and should provide indicators on which you can base your evaluation, your monitoring. And this should be actually, we will see later in the implementation, how you monitor regularly and report on the progress, and how you do a mid-term review and a final evaluation through the implementation of the NSDS. Now, you have the vision, you did the assessment, you have the vision, the mission, the core values, you have the strategic objectives, you have developed your annual action plans, you have your section on financing strategy, you have identified the risk and risk mitigation, you have your M&E framework. Now it's time to put all together and have your NSDS document. And once you have your NSDS document all together, there is a need to validate your NSDS with your stakeholders. Again, to engage stakeholders in the whole process, just to have their satisfaction in terms of what will be produced, but also support during the implementation. At this stage, you have your document, your NSDS document, and it has then to be endorsed and approved by the high-level decision making. In some countries, it is even endorsed by the government in a government cabinet meeting. In other countries, it is just adopted by the high-level statistics committee, like the Statistics Council. So it depends on how the country is organized, but it is very important for the NSDS to be adopted, if possible, by the cabinet, and then it becomes a national strategy, and the government will be responsible to mobilize funding for its implementation, but also monitor its implementation and enforce the accountability of the NSS to meet the results, which is already defined in the NSDS. Thank you very much, Leandre. I am at the end of the second stage. Maybe before I can move to the third stage, which is the final stage.
There's a question. I think the question is still related to the first phase. Coming from Nora, who was asking if it's necessary to establish a donor working group at this point of preparation, the preliminary stage.
Sure, that's critical. That's very, very critical. The donor working group for statistics is very important to align the donor support. And Nora is right. This is key in terms of mobilizing and coordinating support to the national statistical system from donors. Sometimes you will find that you have actually a lot of funding, but not coordinated around the NSDS, and you might have some duplication even in the data production. So this is very key. The donor working group on statistics is very important and should be linked to the NSDS action plan so that all support are channeled through the NSDS action plan which is developed. Thank you very much, Nora.
There's another question from Leonie from Cameroon. Can we have an estimation of the time each stage can take? Is it a general recommendation on it? Maybe I don't know why you have to respond to this now, or you can do it later on because we still have the last phase, last stage.
Yes, but maybe briefly, Leonie, the estimation of the time for each stage is estimated, but this depends on the capacity of the country. First, I mean here the capacity of the NSS, but also the support from the government. So we in the guidelines, we have a chart which shows the estimated time for each stage and what is involved. So the development of the whole strategy takes between 6 and 18 months, depending on first of all, the sectors that are involved. Second, the capacity of the NSS. Third, the commitment from the stakeholders to be engaged in this. So it depends on how it depends on each country's commitment and capacity. I can probably give an example here that Senegal, for example, in 2019, they managed to finish the whole process within 6 months. But they mobilized a technical group which was actually working almost full-time on this. So if you are engaged and you have the capacity, you can do it. In other countries, it can take 1 year, 1.5 years, and even beyond. So this depends on the capacity and the engagement. There is another question from Josephine. Has PARIS21 and other partners in all countries have NSDSs in place across the continent? If I understand well the question, Josephine, we do organize or update the status of the NSDS in all developing countries. And we every year we update the NSDS status table so we can know where each country is according to its NSDS either design or implementation. This is, of course, based on the information that we receive. Sometimes it's not really well updated in some countries because sometimes a country can have an expired NSDS in terms of the implementation period, but maybe they have extended the implementation and they don't communicate on that. And you might find that probably we just say that it is expired. So if it is revised and extended for maybe 1 or 2 years, that should also be communicated. So we rightly update the implementation. The DG.
Yes, please go on.
Yes, the DG for the DG AITRIS, Mr. Said, also asked the question, what is the best manner to identify the data users? Because there is a big number of users from different domain specialties, sectors, levels, like national, international, subnational. Yes, you are right, Said. It is a matter here, it is a matter of prioritization. There is a big number of data users, but we need to base our NSDS on the policy documents. And what is highlighted in the policy documents are as priority data needs. This means the National Development Plan, the sector strategic plans, the subnational plans, the cross-cutting issues, the international and regional and continental agendas that are demand. What are the priorities? And then we select the priorities from there, and we involve the data users from the priorities. Otherwise, you can't manage it. It will be just too big, and it will be very difficult to manage. That can be my just simple question.
There are some questions that was directly sent to me. Well, maybe I can read them, but I just want to inform also the participants that they have to share the question with all the participants. So there's one question about the risk analysis. This stage before having risk mitigation, why don't we have first risk analysis than come up with risk mitigation strategy? I don't know if I well understand, but I don't know if you understood that question.
The analysis of the risks is important. If I understand where the question, it's about identifying and analyzing the risks. This is key. You have to analyze the risks and try to find what will be the risk mitigation. Because, of course, when you are implementing your NSDS, you will have risks. That's for sure. So if you have those, or you encounter those risks, what is your risk mitigation? You should have it already. And of course, you will have other unexpected risks. And at that time, yes, you will have to deal with it. And please make sure that you have the users with you, you have the stakeholders with you, you have the development partners with you in implementing those risk mitigations. And when you define it prior to your implementation, it's also a kind of transparency. And everyone can see that you have identified those risks and you are trying to mitigate those risks if they happen. Mr. Luke, question about the assumption of the existence of national quality assurance framework. How many countries have already developed their national quality assurance framework? Please send your response. Your responses. Each country can send an answer to this question through the chat, so we know which country has already the national quality assurance framework and which one does not have it. Thank you.
There's a last question before you move on to this next the deployment stage. The question is about the monitoring and evaluation framework. So is it enough only to have only monitoring and evaluation framework? Why don't we have the monitoring and evaluation plan which because monitor evaluation plan is more large than and even as we know basically, but it's long. But the question is why we don't have a monitoring and evaluation plan instead of monitoring and evaluation framework.
Thank you. Yes, you should have the monitoring and evaluation plan, and the framework actually should be based at each stage or the whole process. I mean, should be based on the plan, the monitoring and evaluation plan. So you are right. Actually, the framework will be based on the implementation, I mean, the monitoring and evaluation, more large plan, and we see how this can be done. So yes, the monitoring and evaluation plan should be developed, and associated frameworks should also be developed. And this actually takes me to the deployment stage, where the monitoring, evaluation, and reporting are applied. So if you allow me to go to the deployment stage, I can move ahead, and then we continue discussions after we are done with this stage again. Is there any question on the previous one?
Please proceed, Philip.
Thank you very much. So the deployment stage is about implementation of the NSDS. And we saw that the NSDS should be validated, should be endorsed. And once this is done, there is a need to be disseminated. A wide communication of the NSDS is required. And basically, it has to be communicated, disseminated to all stakeholders, so they know that the plan is there, the strategy is there, and the implementation plan is developed, and all the support basically should be aligned with the NSDS. And then we have the monitoring and evaluation, the mid-term review, and the final evaluation throughout the implementation stage of the NSDS. Now, once you have done your dissemination, you need to do the resource mobilization. And here, again, this is key. But it becomes easier to mobilize resources when the stakeholders have been involved in the whole process. So I'm emphasizing on a sustainable domestic financing of the NSDS, but also mobilization of international development partners support. And this is very important. If the NSDS is adopted by the government, is likely easier to mobilize domestic funding for its implementation and development partners support as well. Next is to implement. Once you have mobilized the resources, these are technical and financial resources, then you are at the phase of implementing your NSDS. And remember that the implementation is coordinated by the NSO, but we have sector strategies for the development of statistics, embedded in the sector action plans. So the coordination structure, the NSS government structure, the leadership of the NSS should be strong enough and clear to coordinate the implementation of this strategy in order to achieve the expected strategic outputs and outcomes. There is a need to monitor and report on the implementation of the NSDS. This is a regular monitoring and reporting, and the guidelines recommends at least doing the monitoring and reporting every year, but you can do it every quarter or every month if you need, if you have the capacity to do it, and if the activity implementation plan is enough to be monitored monthly. But at least we recommend to have a monitoring report every year of the implementation of the NSDS. And then the MNE plan and the MNE framework should define clear the indicators that has to be monitored during the implementation of the NSDS. Remember here, we are not monitoring the statistics output. We are monitoring the implementation of the NSDS. What has been defined to be implemented during the NSDS. That's what we are monitoring. And we also need to, every year, based on the monitoring and reporting of the implementation of the NSDS, to update and validate the annual action plans. Remember that there will be changes, there will be circumstances that can provide any changes every year, so that we need to update and validate the initial action plans, the annual action plans every year that we have defined at the stage, the starting point of designing the NSDS, so that we remain relevant. This means that the NSDS is actually a living document. That's why the action plans are updated and validated every year to take into consideration any new development that arise during the implementation of the NSDS. But we also recommend a mid-term review to track the progress of the achievement, and also, of course, identify issues that and challenges that are necessary to adjust during the middle of the implementation plan of the NSDS. And the conclusions or recommendations from this midterm review will help to adjust either the goals, the action plans, of course, the budget, according to the recommendation from the midterm review. You will see, for example, with the crisis of the coronavirus, all countries have adjusted most of their action plans, focusing on measuring the impact of the pandemic, which was not probably there with their NSDS before, because we were not expecting to have it. And also adapting using technology in such circumstances to get timely data which can help to monitor the pandemic. We also recommend at the end of the NSDS implementation an evaluation of the whole NSDS implementation. This helps to identify the strengths and the weaknesses during the implementation of the NSDS, but also to understand what has been the success stories from the implementation of the NSDS, which can help us to improve much more our national statistical development. We recommend also that the final evaluation be done by an independent entity if possible, just to ensure that it's objective, it's impartial, and you have an outsider understanding of how you have implemented your NSDS. But of course, the NSS should be fully involved in this process of the evaluation. And the evaluation, again, which provides the findings and recommendations, should be approved and endorsed by stakeholders. Remember, we started with the stakeholders together with the NSS to develop the NSDS. Now we are at the end of the implementation. This is likely 5 years later for those countries with an NSDS of 5 years. Now we have to get the stakeholders with us to approve and endorse this validation, the evaluation findings and recommendations, and if possible, disseminate it widely to all stakeholders so that they know where we are, because this is the phase now where we need to move to the new NSDS development. So just to conclude this on this stage, the final evaluation findings are a key input to the design of the next NSDS. And then you restart again your NSDS life cycle. Thank you, Leandre. Maybe just before we can maybe discuss in details on this stage, let me just mention that the guidelines, the NSDS Guidelines 3.0 have included special topics. And these special topics, which are identified as important to be integrated in the NSDS, it will depend on what the country wants to take into consideration. But for each special topic that is shown here, the guidelines shows the entry points during the NSDS development, so that the National Statistical System can take into consideration these key special topics. And the special topics that we have in the NSDS 3.0 are administrative data, Agenda 2030, crisis management and statistics planning, data revolution, fragile states, gender statistics, geospatial data, innovation, open data, regional strategies for the development of statistics, subnational strategies for the development of statistics, sectoral strategies for the development of statistics, but also the seeds, and of course, a statistical legislation. So the special topics that are here were identified as important, but they can be updated anytime, they can be revised anytime, and also new topics identified as important can be also added in the future revisions of the NSDS guidelines. Again, I want to mention that the guidelines are also a living document. So we update it as we find very important revisions to be done. The guidelines also make reference to resources. And these resources, the purpose is, of course, to enrich and contextualize and operationalize the guidelines, while we encourage peer exchanges of experiences and good practices from countries. And you will find that we have collected country examples and good practices. You will find, for example, how you can use ADAPT during the NSDS process, the capacity development 4.0, but we have always also made reference to other related guidelines that can support the development of the NSDS. We don't intend to be exhaustive here, of course, but we have tried our best to include as much as other related guidelines developed by other organizations as well that can support the development of the NSDS and, of course, tools. So we see that the identified resources are all mentioned at every steps, but also you can find them in one place if you want to go into details. Of course, the resources are, as you know, necessary. They will help you to prepare, they will help you when you implement, and they will help you, of course, when you update or you revise your NSDS. So, to conclude, what are the key factors to a successful NSDS? As you can see, if you want your NSDS to be well designed, stakeholders engaged, and successfully implemented, you need a strong political support and explicit recognition of statistics in the national development strategies, and therefore in the sector strategies, the subnational strategies, and so on. But also, you need to engage users. You need to engage stakeholders. You need to put in place a dialogue forum, a dialogue mechanism throughout the NSDS process. And I will emphasize here the need to have the planning and the monitoring and evaluation units when you develop your NSDS and when you implement your NSDS, is to make sure that you are responding to the data demand, because they are the one basically monitoring the implementation of the national development plans, but also the SDGs, the Agenda 2063, and so on. Third, it is a common and inclusive strategy where you integrate all components of the NSS, but also beyond the normal NSS and include the new data ecosystem, so that you will have also the private sector with you, the academia with you, the civil society organizations with you, and the citizens. Because here we can see that we are now moving to using big data, and most of the big data are produced by the private sector. So how do we engage the private sector? How do we work with them to use the big data and to make sure that we have quality data? Another factor is the commitment and the contribution of the NSS to implement the action plans. The NSS stakeholders should understand that the implementation of the action plans is their responsibility and should commit to it, and together with the NSO, mobilize all resources for the successful implementation. The other key factor is the domestic funding. Sometimes most of, let me say, many NSDS's implementation are supported by international funding without any sustainable domestic funding. And this is sometimes an issue. So there is really a need to have a more sustainable domestic funding, but also a coordinated way to support or coordinated support from development partners. And the coordinated support from development partners, we go back to the question that Nora actually put it forward in creating a coordination donor group to support statistics. This is key, and it will help to align the support to the implementation of the NSDS. But most importantly here, there is a very high need to have a more sustainable domestic funding so that the implementation of the NSDS is not based on or totally on the external support. Of course, an effective monitoring of the NSDS implementation, we talked about this. You can't know where you are if you are not effectively monitoring the implementation of the NSDS, and it will be very difficult to adjust when you don't monitor your NSDS. All this, you have the challenges, and of course, a question was raised by SIDE. How do you consider this, the stakeholders, the users? There are many, of course, and this increased the data demand. But what is important here is that our NSDS should be responsive to the policy data demand, to the development agendas data demand, but we need to prioritize. And the prioritization of the NSDS action plan and let's say strategic objectives should be based on the priorities that are expressed in the development agendas from the national development plans to the SDGs through the regional strategic, through regional strategies and continental strategies, of course. That's one. So the prioritization is key, but it's also a challenge. Second, once you have the prioritization done, then you have to align your data production to the user demand or to the user needs. And here you have the NSS capacity development constraints. Sometimes there is not enough capacity to do so. You have a constraints on how do you innovate to respond to the user data demand? Do you have appropriate technology? How do you take into consideration new data ecosystem environment? And here, how do you take on board the big data vis-a-vis the quality of data produced by the private sector? How do you involve the methodologies to include the big data, the citizen-generated data, to report on the indicators that are not normally produced by the NSS. But also, how do you coordinate the NSS? And there is a need here to coordinate, to manage, but also to increase your leadership as NSO to make sure that the coordination is set. And here we have the challenge in some countries on the governance, the NSDS or the NSS governance, the legislation provisions. Those are some challenges that you face when you need to coordinate your NSDS design and implementation. The other challenge, we have talked about it, is how do you engage stakeholders? How do you make that stakeholders are with you in the whole process of the NSDS design and implementation? So these are some key challenges that you have. And how do you mobilize a sustainable domestic funding? How do you coordinate the development partners for their support to data and statistics development? So thank you very much. I conclude by saying that these are the challenges that we can probably discuss and be aware that we have to focus on these to respond to the success factors to design and implement the NSDS in the country. Thank you very much, Leandre. I think at the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Philippe, for this fantastic presentations. It was not simple to summarize all the NSDS guidelines in the presentation. And then maybe let me highlight some of the one or two things you have said, particularly for the good implementation of NSDS. So you stress the need of strong political commitment, a keen dialogue, and also the funding. So these are elements that are essential and critical for the good implementation of NSDS. There's one question here from Isaac. We want to know the difference between the actual guidelines and the previous one. So if you can take that, answer that question.
Thank you. The difference here, one, I will start by saying that we have critically revised the guidelines in terms of friendliness on how you access the guidelines. We have made it text lighter. It was very heavy before, and we have revised completely the website of the NSDS to make it user-friendly. That's one. So you can access all the steps from wherever you are. And we have included several special topics as well as resources, but also the glossary where you have the definitions of some key terms. But we have emphasized also the whole life cycle, how it goes, and also emphasizing in many steps what should be taken into consideration. So when you look at the guidelines, you will see that we have defined concrete actions that has to be taken at every step. So that's the big difference between the current and the previous guidelines.
Okay,
and also emphasizing that you have to take into consideration the sectors, the subnational, but also the new data ecosystem environment, basically the private sector with emphasis on using big data, but also involving civil society organization by taking into consideration citizen-generated data, but also the academia in terms of analysis, in terms of training, and so on. So these are key elements that we have. And when you look at the guidelines, we see that it's much more user-friendly now. So we encourage you to provide any comments for its improvement. Please don't hesitate. Provide your comments, and we keep updating the guidelines. We have included some good practices from countries across the world, and we will be very happy to receive your comments, and we will continue to update accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippe. We are now running out of time for this session, but let me choose 3 questions here that you can answer. Let me read the 3 questions. The first one is about where is it? It's about the sectoral statistic plan developed during NSDS design. Who provided funding for the sectoral statistic plan? So that's the first question. The second one is about from Leonie. Leonie, can we have key indicators to first evaluate the NSDS and after the deployment of the NSDS at final evaluation? And the last one is there already existing indicator for monitoring NSDS? So these are the 3 questions you take.
Thank you. Can you please repeat the first question on the RSDS? I didn't.
It was to see who found the sectoral strategies.
I think we should make this as a comprehensive national statistical strategy. The sectors are involved or incorporated in the national statistical system. And the funding, in most cases, should be aligned to the expressed needs in the NSDS. It doesn't mean that the funding should go, the funding of the sector statistical strategies should go through the NSO. It can go directly to the sectors, but the NSO as a coordinator of the NSS, it has to know what is happening and how they can coordinate the implementation. So let's say, for example, you have to report on education sector indicators. Sometimes the funding to education statistics goes directly to the education sector, but it has to appear in the NSDS so that it is the statistical system is well coordinated and you know what is being produced and how can you coordinate the methodologies for the comparison of the data purposes. So where the NSDS is decentralized, the sectors takes care of their own implementation, and where the NSS is centralized, of course, the NSO will lead on everything. So it depends on how the NSS is critically organized. Sorry, next question was, sorry.
It's about if there's if there already exists indicator for monitoring NSDS?
They are just indications, because this will depend on each NSDS from each country, because you don't have any NSDS that fits for all countries. So in every country we have its own NSDS based on the data demand from the country. What we encourage here is the recommendations on how you do it. But the indicators for NSDS monitoring will depend on what is in your NSDS, but they are just indications in that. Third question was?
But the third question was also linked to that indicators. But let me read one question here that was about the governance. What's an ideal NSS governance structure? So maybe it goes a little bit beyond this, but if you can answer, give some indication before we move to the next section.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sheila. I think this is a critical question, and it does, of course, the ideal NSDS governance structure will depend on the country governance structure. That should be my response to that. But where the NSO has the legal mandate to coordinate the NSS within an NSS, decentralized NSS structure, I think that the NSO should be given enough power and capacity to do so. And this helps a lot to coordinate not only the NSDS implementation, but also give a leadership and orientation on how the statistical development should be, and be the leader or the focal point to the focal point of the national statistical development system vis-a-vis the government, so that everything is coordinated, is structured through the coordination of the NSO. So where you have the NSS, which is centralized, you have another structure. And where you have an NSS, which is decentralized, you have another structure. But what counts here is to have a strong coordination in terms of institutional coordination, but also in terms of statistical output coordination. And this will appear in the Act, actually. If the Act does not define this, it will be extremely difficult to be implemented.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you also, participants, for your questions. And we a little bit went far beyond the time allocated to this session, but it was very interesting to have this discussion and to try to answer all the questions. So now we are moving to the next presentation from STATAFRIC, which is going to be on the harmonization of statistical plan in Africa, mainstreaming SASHA 2 in National Strategy for Development of Statistics and also Regional Strategy for Development of Statistics, the version 3.0. So who is going to make the presentation? Is Muna?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Please, Muna, you have the floor.
Thank you, Leandro. I am Muna Zgouli. I'm advisor for the implementation of SASHA 2 in STATAFRIC, and I share my screen. It's okay?
Yes, we can see your screen, your presentation.
Thank you. After the presentation of Philip, it was a good presentation. I will present the main process of integrating SHASA2 into the new generation of NSDS and RSDS using the guideline 3.0. I begin my presentation with a brief reminder of SHASA2, NSDS, RSDS. Why mainstreaming? What's the objective of mainstreaming SHASA2 and the objective of integrating statistical strategies? After that, I present the how we integrate the main process of SHASA2 in the NSDS life cycle as defined by PARIS21. And I finish my presentation by describing some particularities for the regional strategy in account with regional level, while the life cycle of the regional strategy is the same as that of the national strategy. What is SHASA2? SHASA2 is a continental strategy for the development of statistics in Africa, adopted by African leaders for the period 2017-2026. This strategy will enable the African statistical system to generate timely, reliable, and harmonized statistical information, which covers all aspects of political, economic, social, and cultural integration for Africa. This strategy has 4 strategic themes. The first theme is to produce quality statistics for Africa. The second is to coordinate the production of quality statistics for Africa. The third is to build sustainable institutional capacity in the African statistical system. And the fourth is to promote a culture of quality policy and decision making. These 4 themes are the roadmap of the continental strategy SHASA2 for the period 2017-2026. Well, what is NSDS? NSDS is, just said by Philip, is a national framework process for developing statistics across the entire national statistical system. The key objective of the national strategy is to mainstream statistics into national policy and planning processes, mainstream sectors and other players into the national statistical system, coordinate the national statistical system, and produce quality data that respond to user needs and respond to data challenges and build statistical capacity across the production process. The process involves all major actors within the national statistical system: producers and users, decision makers, legislators, technical and financial partners, civil society, private sector, universities, research, institutional. All this represent the stakeholders which will be involved in all the process of designing and implementing the national strategy. For the regional strategy, it is a master plan for regional statistical development. It responds to regional priorities, specific regional policy objectives, as well as continental and international agendas. It's also linked to national priorities and is consistent with the national statistical strategy of member states, and it focuses on the production of comparable statistical indicators between countries based on harmonized methodologies to support the goals of regional integration processes. The relationship between the 3 strategies. At the national level, we have the national strategy, which will be implemented via the National Statistical Program, and it is the responsibility of the member states. At the regional level, we have the regional strategy implemented via the Regional Statistical Program and with the responsibility of FREX. And the continental level, we have the SACHA2 strategy implemented via the Continental Statistical Program, which is the responsibility of STATAFRIC. The relationship between the three strategies, SACHA2 must be integrated in the regional and national strategy, and the NSDS and RSDS process must be complementary. And the programs, we have many relationships between all the programs at national, regional, and continental level. And for the structure, we have the relationship between STATAFRIC and REX and EU member states via the Executive Committee of SACHA2. Why mainstreaming? SACHA2 was developed to support the production of timely, reliable, and harmonized statistics to aid the African integration process and inclusive development at the national, regional, and continental level. Improve statistical coordination among national statistical institutes, regional and continental organizations, and development partners. Mainstreaming SACHA2 into the national and regional strategies will ensure the concurrent, coherent, and systematic implementation of these strategies and improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the African statistical system. It helps establish a single monitoring and evaluation mechanism for the African statistical system. There are a number of benefits to integrating and aligning statistical strategies at the national, regional, and the continental level. One of these benefits is to respond to the SACHA2 action plan, which directs linking the development and implementation of NSDS and RSDS to SACHA2. It was in the objective 2.1.3 and sub-objective 2.1.4. It allows SACHA2 to be implemented through regional and national statistical system to enable the African statistical system meet its needs for harmonized and reliable statistics. Harmonization of concept, definition, and methodologies to allow for cross-country comparison with national government as well as regional and continental bodies, and improve the quality of data by standardizing methods and sharing best practices. Implementing at the same time the strategies will help produce data that simultaneously meet national, regional, continental, and international needs and conserve resources, as the same data set can be reused rather than individual data collection exercise being carried out for each purpose. Other objectives are avoiding different and conflicting action at the national, regional, and continental level, allow for integrated monitoring and evaluation frameworks for strategies operational at the national, regional, and continental level, focusing on specific areas of needs at all levels in order to clarify, articulate what the requirements are for improving the data system. For example, this may highlight common capacity requirement or particular data gaps that require methodologic work to be filled. And finally, we can having a clear view of the obstacle in the data system and ways to remove them will make it easier to mobilize resources at all levels to strengthen the data ecosystem. Now, we in the process of mainstreaming SACHA2 in the NSDS life cycle, we take the presentation of PARIS21 to the NSDS life cycle, and we try to give some recommendation to integrate the main process of SACHA2 in the 3 stages and their different phases. In the many entries to mainstream SACHA2 in the process of NSDS and RSDS, especially in the design phases. And this mainstream will allow simultaneously implementation of the national strategy, regional strategy with SACHA2. In the preliminary stage, and in the phase of engaging stakeholders. As stakeholders are assessing the status of statistics and reviewing data needs, it can be helpful also to layer on the continental perspective that SHASA2 provides to allow comparison with other countries and to align with continental priorities. And in the designing the roadmap, one of the specific activities to be undertaken should be a review of SHASA and other regional and continental strategy documents to ensure that they are integrated. In the design stage and with the phase of assessing the national statistical system, SHASA2 provides an assessment of strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats of the African statistical system. While each country's national statistical system will be at different points in its evolution and experience different strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. These common issues can be helpful as a basis for design team to begin thinking about which of these apply to their systems. In the phase of the vision and identifying strategic goals, for the vision for the national statistical system, it must be aligned with the vision of SHASA2. The vision of the African statistical system has been defined as an efficient statistical system that generates reliable, harmonized, and timely statistical information covering all dimensions of political, economic, social, environmental, and cultural development and integration of Africa. The mission and vision of the national statistical system should reflect the UN fundamental principle of official statistics and the African Chart of Statistics. In the strategic goal, the strategic objective of SHASA2 must be taken in account. They are grouped in 3 and 4 terms: produce quality statistics for Africa, coordinate the production of quality statistics for Africa, develop a sustainable institutional capacity in the African statistical system, and promote a culture of quality policy and decision-making. NSDS drafting teams should attempt to align their strategic objectives with those of SHASA2 in this phase of the design stage. In the phase of elaborating action plans, the action plans should align with the vision, strategic terms, and objective and logical framework of SHASA2. The main initiative and outcomes that emanate from the strategic objectives include the adoption of common international norms adapted to African reality, and a better coordination of development efforts and production of a wide range of harmonized statistics in order to inform political decision and measure progress made in the implementation of the development agendas. Action plans at the national level should also take into account of the governance and implementation mechanism for SHASA2. In the deployment stage and in the phase of implementation and monitoring, there are a number of implementation principles for the NSDS that also apply to SHASA2. For example, check the consistency and feasibility of the action plan, promote an active involvement of senior management and an appropriate governance of the implementation process, division of action plan into smaller projects, aiming for performance structure, develop structure and approaches which are common to the overall program and can be used over time, exploiting the power of human resources and communications, documentation, evaluation, monitoring, and adjustment. In this phase, it's better to have a dashboard to be included in the NSDS to track, analyze, and display key performance indicators related to African Chart of Statistics and SHASA2, to ensure that all the components of these two frameworks have been properly integrated in the national strategy. In the evaluation phase, it's crucial for NSDS drafters to understand when and in what format reporting to a continental structure will be requested and how their action may influence statistical development on the continent. The reporting structure for SHASA2 should be taken into account when planning NSDS monitor, evaluate, and reporting process. This is for the mainstreaming of SHASA2 in the NSDS life cycle. Now, I should present how we mainstream SHASA2 in NSDS life cycle, and we, as the life cycle of RSDS is the same as NDS, we present some particularity of the regional strategy. We have the relation between NSDS and RSDS. The NSDS and RSDS processes must be complementary, and NSDS maybe need to be updated to take the RSDS into account. So the relationship between NSDS, RSDS, and SHASA2 is very important to have the necessary data required for producing at continental levels. In the preliminary stage, and especially for stakeholders, the responsible of the regional strategy is REX, and the mandate is received by REX from head of state of member countries. We must have continuous feedback between national and regional levels, linking with continental bodies to ensure connection with SHASA2 and other continental programs. And REX must play a key role in advancing regional integration and achievement of development agenda, such as Agenda 2063. Regional coordination of statistical production will be vital to ensuring data progress towards integration in all thematic areas can be accurately measured in the regional strategy. In the phase of engaging stakeholders, the stakeholders at the regional level are the regional organization and its authorities, NSS, including the national statistical offices and related authorities of member states, national, regional, and international users of regional statistical information. With respect to SHASA2, stakeholders of interest are the regional and national coordinator of SHASA2, Pan-African institutions, and STATAFRIC. In the roadmap, we must, in the regional strategy, connection must be done with specialized technical group STGs, overseeing sectoral statistical work in the SHASA2 to appreciate thematic areas that require attention. In the phase of preparing, it was better to mobilize support at the highest regional level and from countries and partners within the region, establishing a steering committee and establishing a project management team. In the phase of, in the design stage and in the phase of assessing the regional statistical system, major issues for REX is the weak capacity to ensure an effective leadership in the coordination of statistical activities at the regional level and the overlapping of memberships of REX, which leads to duplication in programs and demands for data. For the vision and the strategic goal, as with the strategy, the national strategy, the regional strategy vision and strategies should take SHASA2 into account, in particular the strategic objective 2.1, strengthen cooperation between the different institutions of the African statistical system, specifically focusing on the strengthening of statistical capacity at the regional level. The second strategic objective is strategic objective 2.3, underlines the importance of providing quality data for multilateral surveillance monitoring, continental and international agendas at regional levels, and for calculating the regional integration index. these particular strategy objectives of Chassa-2 must be taken into account and design the vision of the regional strategy. In the deployment stage and in the phase of implementation, RECs are encouraged to prepare monitoring, evaluation, and reporting frameworks that incorporate the Chassa-2 monitoring schedule for RECs. Regional statistical activity reports are to be submitted biannually to STATAFRIC, which is the general coordinator for the implementation of Chassa-2. And regional coordinators will consolidate national progress reports on the state of implementation of Chassa-2 and submit such regional activity reports to STATAFRIC. And as suggested for the National Statistical Development Strategy, a data dashboard may also be necessary here to support real-time monitoring of the regional strategy implementation for key performance indicators that are related to the African Chart of Statistics and Chassa-2. And thank you for your attention, and so that STATAFRIC support all member states and RECs for mainstreaming Chassa-2 into NSDS and RSDS. And thank you.
Thank you, Muna, with this fantastic presentation, where you highlighted that need to mainstream Sasha in the NSDS and RSDS, and you also even show how they can do. This can be done in the different stages in the process of NSDS and RSDS. This is very important for us here to ensure consistency with what we do at the national, sub-regional, and the regional level, and have a coordinated way of approaching things. Now, let me give the floor to to the participants to ask their questions. Here in the chat, I see one question from Nora, who is asking if the Sasha-2 is synonymous with the Agenda 2063. What is the link between the two? Can you answer this question, Mona?
Yes. Chassa-2 is the continental strategy to harmonize statistics in Africa, and it responds to the Agenda 2063 of Africa.
Okay, thank you. I don't see. Is there another question? In the spirit of harmonization, this is a question from Zambia. In the spirit of harmonization of concept, definition, and methodology, is there a key indicator book that countries can refer to during the development of NSDS? I think this is more or less it's come more or less to it's addressed to Philippe, if I'm not wrong. But if you can provide some answer before Philippe come in.
So you
Yes, Muna.
Yes, you can repeat the question, please.
In the spirit of harmonization of concepts, definitions, and methodologies, is there a key indicators book that countries can refer to during the development of NSDS?
Philippe will speak about SDS, but I will speak about Chassa-2. One of the objectives of Chassa-2 is to harmonize the concept and definition, and the technical statistical groups defined by Chassa-2 have the objective to harmonize the concept and definition. And now we are working in STATAFRIC to activate these groups, and which groups are related to different sectors, the statistical sectors, to arrive to harmonize the concept and definition in relation with Chassa-2. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Philippe, please, could you also step in here to provide some, to answer this question?
Yes. Thank you, Josephine, for the question. I think this is much more about which areas can be identified during the development of the NSDS to be strengthened. The harmonization of concepts and definitions and methodologies depends on the level of each country again. And it is related to several subject matters. And each NSO sometimes, or most of the time, they have to harmonize their concepts and definitions and methodologies within the national context using the international standards. And there are manuals that are produced in every subject matter, which can be used by countries. So if countries don't have this done yet, then it can be one of the activity that can be identified in the NSDS development during the assessment, and they include it during the design. So it depends on each subject matter if the question was that. Otherwise, Josephine, please ask loudly the question, maybe if we did not answer the question. Thank you.
So, Josephine, are you satisfied with this answer, or you want to elaborate, to add something?
I think I'm okay with the answer now, because I was looking at I think the slide that Muna presented, which was looking at continental level, region level, and then at national level. So, and then we have different strategies at that different levels. So I was saying that if, for instance, I was looking at it in terms like NSDS was like feeding into I'm looking at it in a different angle, was feeding into the region, which is RSDS, and then the RSDS feeds into the SASHA2, which is at that continental level. So if I have to during the time of assessment of NSDS and when you are developing the NSDSs, I think I'm looking at how do I maybe refer to the indicators that may be at that level, at different levels, in a way like we are mainstreaming certain indicators that are consistent in terms of definitions, concepts, and methodologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Maybe during the exchanges, you also bring some new ideas, also some element to clarify this. Now,
sorry, this is Josephine, not Sheila.
Josephine, sorry. No, I see Josephine. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Josephine. Because I was reading a message from Sheila, so that's a response from Philip to a question asked by Sheila. That's why I was confused. Okay, thank you. Now we are going to move to the country's presentation, but before that, let us take a 5-minute break. We don't move where we are, so we make a little stretch. You see, so we stretch a little bit. Like the background makes that I cannot, you cannot see what I'm doing. So we relax a little bit. Okay, so we got now to have 2 presentations from Cameroon and Uganda, National Institute of Statistics of Cameroon and Uganda Bureau of Statistics. What are the typical barriers to an effective NSDS design, implementation, and working with partners? What are the key recommendations going forward, and taking into consideration the accelerators learned from COVID-19? So this presentation will help us to learn about countries' experiences And we are looking forward to welcome the presenter from Cameroon. Who is going to make the presentation from Cameroon? Is it the presenter from Cameroon? Are you ready?
Maybe Christophe?
I saw two participants, at least two persons from Cameroon. I don't know. Christophe was there, and also, so who is making the presentation from Cameroon? So if maybe they have connection problem, maybe you can move to Uganda. Leonie, who is making presentation from Cameroon? Is it Leonie? Is it Christophe? Okay, what about is Christophe? Okay. Christophe is not connected. He was connected, but it seems that he has connection problem. I don't see him now in the list of participants. Okay. While waiting for Christophe to get back, can Uganda make? I want to know if Uganda can make the presentation. Who is making a presentation from Uganda? You, boss? So Philip, who is the person who confirmed on Uganda side?
I think they have responded. I should mention that it is about sharing your experience on developing your new NSDS that you have already completed. So please.
Maybe while waiting for them to be connected, let us have a discussion here. If a country is willing to share any experience in this.
Hello.
Yes. Someone what? Yes.
Yes. Good afternoon.
Yes. Good afternoon, Molly.
This is Molly from Uganda Bureau of Statistics.
Okay. So are you the one going to make the presentation?
Yes. It's not a PowerPoint though.
Okay. Please go on.
I'm going to talk. I hope it will still help.
Yes, of course.
Good afternoon once more.
Good afternoon. Okay.
My network is not so good, but I hope you'll be able to pick a few things which I'm going to present here. In regard to our NSDS, which we just completed the development and we're in the first year of its implementation. During the design and as we started the implementation, a number of barriers were identified, which we are also trying to work on addressing them. Key on the barriers, one is the ineffectiveness of our legal framework. The U-Boss Act, which is the legal framework which we are using as the NSO, which is supposed to be applied to the entire national statistical system. We discovered that the legal framework is not to the tune of holding the entire NSS well coordinated and bringing everyone on board. For example, you find that it is giving more powers to the NSO, but powers of enforcing on the institutions in the NSS is not so vocal in the legal framework. And also some stakeholders like the non-state actors are not accounted for in the legal framework. So we are not in position to bring them on board fully. However, in this NSDS, which we have just developed and are implementing, we have scheduled to review this legal framework to come up with a statistics bill, which shall give the NSO full authority to hold everyone accountable and be in position to proper coordinate the NSS and also supervise and technically support not just the state actors, but even the civil society organizations, the private sector, as we expand on our NSS coverage. The other barrier which we identified was the weak governance structures. At the apex, we had what is called the NSDS Steering Committee, but the composition had managers at technical level, which comprises of commissioners, directors, which we realized that it was hindering the enforcement of some of the issues which are identified, which needed to be handled by the different institutions within the government apex, because there are other higher authorities which would have been more vocal and would have enforced such issues to all government institutions. So to address the weak governance structures, currently we are trying to establish an interministerial committee, which is going to be the overall steering committee for the current NSDS we are implementing. This committee will be charged with ensuring that resources are mobilized to implement the NSDS, not just in the NSO, but in the entire NSS. This committee is comprising of key government institutions, which is the Ministry of Finance, the Office of the Prime Minister, the National Planning Authority, and a few more who have a voice. When they speak, everyone can listen to them. When they say this, we can get what we need. When we cry for resources, they have that voice and the power to make sure that the resources are allocated for statistical activities, not just in the NSO, but in the entire NSS, including the government ministries, departments, agencies, and then the lower local government levels, and also overseeing what is being done by the CSOs in regards to statistics production. Another barrier which was there is the inadequate financing for statistics. This has been a big problem, not just in the NSO. In the NSO, it's even better. In the other institutions who are part of the NSS, is even worse. When you go to the lower level, it keeps on worsening. This has been a recurrent challenge, but we are hoping that with the instance of the interministerial committee, this issue of the inadequate financing is going to be reduced or addressed completely through ensuring that in every budgeting and planning for all government institutions, statistics is provided for in their strategic plans as they plan. Because we brought on board the Minister of Finance, who is in charge of mobilizing resources for government businesses, and then the Office of Prime Minister, who is a supervisor of all government businesses. Certain that with this committee on board, the resources through the Minister of Finance is going to be mobilized and channeled to the different government institutions to facilitate statistical production and development in the NSS. And we're also hoping that through this committee, they'll be in position to coordinate with the UN Cooperation Committee in the country, and they'll be able to mobilize more resources, and these resources then can be channeled to the different institutions who are handling different work in statistical production and development. Another way we are trying to address the issue of inadequate financing is the development of strategic plans for statistics by all the government ministries, departments, agencies, the local governments, the civil society organizations, and the private sectors, which we have brought on board under this NSDS. This strategy, using them as resource mobilization tools, we know that different development partners and donors could come and see what is in relation to their work, their policy, which they're supporting the implementation in the country, and not just support the policy implementation, but go ahead and support the statistical requirements as would be stipulated clearly in the institutional strategic plans for statistics. The other barrier is the inadequate capacity for both infrastructures. In most of the institutions, you find that there are no professional statisticians. Where they are there, there's high turnover. So most times you move in an institution, when you are going to support them in statistics work, you find that the right person to be doing the work is not available, because the government structure of employment has not taken it seriously to take into account the statisticians as an essential position in the execution of government business. To address this, we are in the process of establishing and operationalizing a common statisticians cadre. This cadre is going to be managed by the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, budgetary implication, and then the Ministry of Public Service, because it is the one in charge of human resource in the government, and then And then the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, who shall be responsible for the technical supervision of this statistician cadre. The statistician cadres are going to be posted into the different government ministries, departments, agencies, and as time goes on, we shall roll down up to the lower local governments to make sure for starter, at least we have someone who is going to be held accountable, whose key result area is specifically statistics, so that we can stimulate the statistical work in those government institutions. On top of that, the Uganda Bureau of Statistics is working with the Ministry of Finance and then the Ministry of Public Service to ensure that in the structure of human resource for all government institutions, there is a unit or a department for statistics provided for. Currently, when we look at what is on ground, very few of the government institutions have functions or departments for statistics, but we are hoping as we implement this, since we already started this initiative, this will be addressed when we bring these departments, and these departments, of course, shall be fully equipped with the necessary resources, financially, human resource, and then the IT, all those. And then we are hopeful that the work in statistical production and development will be improved. The other issues with which we have identified as a great barrier is the inadequacy of the current sources of data to attend to all the emerging data requirements, especially those ones which are emerging from the SDGs. In this current NSDS, we have tried to bring on board new data sources, and we are working to make sure that as the Bureau, we're in position to provide the technical backstopping and the quality assurance for these producers, not just the state agencies, but even the non-state actors, including the CSOs. For example, we've embarked on the citizen-generated data. At the moment, we've engaged different stakeholders, and we have developed a toolkit, which we are going to be using as a country to support the production of statistics using citizen-generated data. And after that, we shall go on to the other sources of data which have not been so commonly used and not so well understood. However, here we shall still have issues of quality assurance, which we hope that at the regional level or continental level, it can be addressed, because when you look at the quality assurance framework at the moment, it does not talk so much about these new data sources, and yet we cannot run away from them. We need them for us to bridge the data gaps. Otherwise, we shall not be in position to provide all the data using just the traditional data sources of the surveys, the censuses, and then the administrative data. And then the other barrier which was there is that there were so many people producing statistics, but no one was supervising them just because they were not part of the NSS, especially the private sector and the civil society organization. In the current NSDS, we've made sure that we brought them on board. They are part and parcel of the NSS. That is why we are even reviewing the different governance structure and the legal framework to make sure that their needs and interests are catered in for. So ideally, our NSS has been expounded, and we've taken into consideration all that is coming from the other side of the civil society, the private sector in our current NSDS. And we are hopeful that this NSDS will take Uganda to another level as we struggle to provide the necessary statistics for the country, regionally, globally. I think that is what I have for now. It's unfortunate that I got this notification last minute, so I couldn't prepare that PowerPoint, but I hope one or two things have been picked. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Molly. Even if we didn't put it on a slide, on a PowerPoint presentation, so you did it well, and then you share with us a Uganda experience, which is very useful for us at the regional level, but also for countries to see issue you face and the strategy you put in place to address these issues. So thank you so much. I just want to know if Cameroon is ready now. Okay, I see that Christophe is ready to share his presentation. So Christophe, you have the floor. Christophe, you have a black screen here. Christophe, can you hear us? Christophe, your mic is off. I don't know if you can hear us. So
Christophe is muted actually.
yes, that's Christophe. Can you unmute yourself? I think maybe he's facing technical issues on his side. Okay, Christophe. Yeah, I see that you are now muted. Can you share your presentation? Are you ready now? Christophe, we can't hear you. I think Christophe has some technical issues on his side. So while waiting for him to address this issue, I just want to know if if someone want to comment or share the national experience on the issues they faced during the implementation of their NSDS, and also how they plan to address these issues. So you can, if someone wants to take the floor, you can raise your hands and share your experience with us. But Christophe, we only have a black screen. I see that you try to share your presentation, but we only have a black screen, a dark screen, and then we can also, we can't hear you. So maybe while waiting for all this to be fixed, I just want to share also two experiences from our side as we work also with countries in this area of NSDS, particularly for during the evaluation event design. What we found is that during the design, countries are generally too optimistic. So we found that the NSDS is generally oversized, and at the end of the day, during their implementation, there are several activities that are not during the evaluation. We found that there are several activities that were not implemented, principally because of this oversize. People are very optimistic, and then they propose activities. The other thing we found also is that sometimes we put people during the design of NSDS, the sectors and other stakeholders propose activities and with limited descriptions. And at the end of the day, during the implementation, when people who propose those activities are not more there, it becomes sometimes difficult to even understand what they wanted to do. We have found in some countries like that where the coordinator of NSDS was unable to explain the context of an activity, what it was supposed, the background activities, what was supposed to be done. But sometimes this is to say that maybe we should have something that is very clear, comprehensive, so that it doesn't depend to people who propose activities. And we also have to have a realistic NSDS. that fit for purpose and also that can be implemented. So I saw that Christophe wanted to say something. I saw that his mic was on, and then he tried to say something. Christophe, can you come in? Did you fix your problem? Otherwise, maybe can I call Rwanda and Namibia to share their experience regarding alignment of their NSDS to their national development plan, because we know that they have done a great job in that area. Rwanda and Namibia, could you share your experience with the participant to this workshop, please? Rwanda, Namibia. May I invite maybe Nora, if she's available, maybe to share some experience on this NSDS design in development in countries, and also she was also the coordinator of NSDS in a country. If you can also share some experience with participants here. I see a comment from Wilson. Molly, you point about the legal framework binding all players in the NSS to work under UBOS is what? Molly, your point about the legal framework binding all players in the NSS to work under the UBOS is instructive. I'm wondering, are there countries where a binding framework is working, i.e. all players in the NSS are obliged to work under the NSOs? So maybe this question is to all of us to know if in your countries your legal framework is working properly. It can bind, it can be used to force the other players to cooperate in the NSS activities. So maybe anyone can take the floor to answer this question or this comment. I see that participant in this today you are very you are silent. No one want to take the floor. Christophe, are you ready now? I can see your presentation, but we can't hear you. Leonie, we can see the presentation, so maybe you can make the presentation on behalf of Christophe. Leonie, Christophe is not connected. It seems like he has a connection problem. So can you make the presentation on his behalf? Yes.
Yeah, Leon.
Yes, Christophe, we can hear you.
Yes, it was very difficult.
Yes,
now,
we understand
okay.
the technical issues. Please, can you, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. My topic today is about the sharing Cameroon's experience with peers on NSDS development with domestic resources or capacity. On the outline, you can see context, the aim of my presentation. The third point is the continuous improvement to autonomy in development of NSDS in Cameroon. After the NSDS-30 innovations, the NSDS funding constraints in Cameroon within the context of lack of a special fund of statistics. At the end, you have the outlooks about the context. The context is of the vision of emerging Cameroon by 2035. And the NSDS 1 and 2 for the monitoring and evaluation of the phase 1 of the vision, of this vision. Today, the NSDS 30 for the monitoring and evaluation of the phase 2 of the same vision. This NSDS 30 is based on FPOS, the African Charter on Statistics, the SACHA2, and other international frameworks. As I said at the beginning, the purpose of the aim of my presentation today is to share Cameroon experience in the development of NSDS 1, 2, and 3. With regard to the continued improvement of the NSDS in Cameroon, at the base, we have the support of Paris 21, a legislative and regulatory framework that have evolved considerably from 2019 with the NSDS 1 till today with the NSDS 30. The following can be noted: the ratification of the African Charter of Statistics by Cameroon and the new law, the new statistic law in Cameroon. As regard to the institutional framework, the establishment of the NSDS, the NSS, and the NSDS by the new law, the 2020 statistical law, marks a break between the pre and the post-law period. Concerning resources, we know that with the NSDS 1 and 2, the accompanying of the NSO with a learning by doing principle. As for statistical standardization, the quality approach in the implementation of the NSDS 30 is part of the methodological innovations that we will specify below. As we say, that the first about the innovation in NSDS-30, the review of the methodology approach of NSDS 1 and 2. You can note that in NSDS 1, you can note that NSDS 1 developed methodology we cannot NSDS in NSDS develop methodology inspired by strategic planning approach. The NSDS 2, at the NSDS 2, the methodology takes into account the strategic planning process, the evaluation with DQAF, takes into account the orientations of SASHA 1, principles of African Charter of Statistics and guidelines of Paris 21. Now in NSDS 30, methodology for developing the NSDS 30 centered on a statistical demand. This is the quality assurance approach. Here, the user is the center of the NSDS 30 implementation. The user need starts from the indicators required. Subsequently, a mapping or alignment of indicators to producer is carried out based on metadata statistical program. As for the development of NSDS 30 activities on the basic of the need assessment, the coordination activities is the NSDS developed on the nature of indicators. Applied research activities start from indicator requiring additional methodological effort. Statistical operations are grouped in indicator identifying in advance. Effort of pool human resource are based on a similar indicator identified for different producer. The second point of innovation is the statistical demand for statistical decentralization. The special feature here is a production of specific strategic for local statistic development. Concerning data movement of statistical decentralization, a proposal is made for the circulation of information for the monitoring and evaluation of local action. As we can see, the first point here, the municipality will be responsible for data collection. After the deconcentrated structure will be in charge of data processing by the sectorial administration regional services. The NSO regional services will be in charge of of data quality assessment. The NSO at the central level will be responsible for the centralization of process data, global consistency, production of report of indicator quality, and at the end, the central administration statistics service will be responsible for processing data and producing the final report, the final annual report. So what are some challenge of the NSDS-ADAPT? Challenge focus on statistical units in decentralized territorial authority, quality assessment reports, opening the NSS to other job profiles, the strategy for mobilizing more resources, the allocation of human resources according to the production needs of the structures, systematization of statistic use for administrative data source as a priority source, the use of alternative data sources. What is the constraints NSDS funding in Cameroon within the context of lack of special fund for statistics? First, funding for NSDS 1 and 2 was provided by a strong awareness and ongoing advocacy. The mobilization of state subsidies with NSO support, the partner funding delivered around a round table, the signing of agreement for the implementation of a specific operation. This has not been without difficulties. The main one being the vulnerability of the NSS financial resources. What about the NSS 3? For the NSS 3 funding, the focus is on the key user being able to funding the needs by the needs directly or indirectly. Then we have 4 approaches. Firstly, financing of major statistic operation. Here, the indicator for the major operations are known and have been improved during the implementation of the NSDS 1 and 2. During direct funding in the budget of administration requesting the statistical operation. The second is the second point, the financing of statistical operation resulting for the evaluation of the performance of administration. This is a new organization. Activities for 2021 are on the way. The performance indicator of administration are grouped in a map of the performance monitoring indicator.
So Christophe, your computer is running off the battery. Are you still with us, Christophe? I think we missed Christophe. His computer was running out the battery. But he highlighted some of the innovations in their NSDS, and I like this fact, the fact that they are now put in place a process to support the ongoing decentralization process in Cameroon. And that's also what we discussed yesterday, saying that the statistical system should be there to respond to users' needs. And they found that for this decentralization process that's going on in the country, local governments wanted to have some statistics that will guide them in their planning and their action, and the NSO has taken some steps to assist them in this area, which is something very, very important, and to respond to user needs, a user-driven statistical system. So I don't know if Christophe is going to come back now, but we want to thank him and also to thank Uganda for their presentation, for this experience they share with us. So I just want to open the floor for discussion now and also questions for 10 to 15 minutes maximum. So I see Cedric from Cameroon who raised his hand, and also Emmanuel. Cedric, you have the floor. Cedric Chubo?
Okay, are you getting me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I just wanted to say that Cameroon is still there for any needs of further explanation.
Okay, thank you so much. But do you have something to add on what Christophe was saying, because he was interrupted?
Not really, since we are not together.
Okay.
So I'll prefer when he will be back, if he has something to add, maybe he could. But I'm just there in case of any inquiry.
Thank you so much. Emmanuel, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. It's been a very good round of presentations, and I would say I've enjoyed it at my end. And I should realize that the fact that not many people are commenting points to the fact that we're still trying to digest the issues and then get the synergies so far as the various presentations are concerned. Because as we would have observed, you realize that the first two presentations are interlinked, and then the country-specific experiences try to contextualize the issues that have been mentioned. That said, I should say that taking the NSDS process as a whole, fundamentally, the processes as in the preliminary, the designs, and then the deployment or the implementation as has been outlined in the NSDS 3.0 are very, very important and key to the various countries and nations. These are fundamentals in terms of systems, structures, and processes. But then I have observed that there are some fundamental issues that we will need to take note of in terms of the challenges. And we need to develop a comprehensive strategy to address some of these challenges. Running through the country's experiences have to do with the issue of funding, issue of governance, and then issues of human resource capacity. And then we also talk of political will, for that matter. I will take the case of Uganda to start with. You realize that Uganda, when they started the process, had some champions that led the process of NSDS development. Professor Kenejia comes to mind, and he was very, very instrumental. But then you realize that going forward, they are coming up with issues of funding, human resource capacity, among the others. Cameroon has also mentioned funding. They've mentioned governance, and then they've mentioned the issue of the statistical unit. So I think we need to have a kind of paradigm shift. Number one, I think we should have AU Paris 21 coming out with a strategy beyond the development of these systems, processes that we all need to follow, trying to see how best they can facilitate some kind of funding in providing catalytic support, because you would have realized that throughout the country, the issue of recognition of statistics is very, very important, where governments recognize the importance of statistics and the role statistics play in national development in terms of measuring results, then they can put funding to it. From where I sit, I realize that with funding, it depends on the government in power and the importance they attach to statistics. And this has not been consistent. We need a kind of strategic move to get all governments, irrespective of where they're coming from, to be committed to statistics. And this, I believe the regional bodies can support us. Again, with funding, I believe we should look at the regional financial institutions. How can they support? African Development Bank have been instrumental at the initial stages. I don't know where they are at the moment. Taking countries, for instance, now they say some of the countries, because they are middle, lower middle income, they don't qualify for some kind of external funding support. How can we manage this, given that national budgets are continually dwindling and the allocation to national budget depends on how governments in power see these statistics to be important? The issue of interministerial, committee that was mentioned, you realize that in the public service and the civil service system that we run, government change, position change. So you put the committee in place, people change, positions change, and then you get back to square zero. Some countries have established the statistics fund, but how are they resourced? Reading around, experience shared show that these statistics fund are underfunded. They exist just in name. So how can we address some of these issues? So I believe the African Union, the regional bodies, apex bodies, should go beyond coming up with just the strategies, but also see how we can collectively do some kind of resource mobilization so that we can help the various NSSs with advocacy, with funding support to set the examples, the good practices, to wipe the appetite of government to see the importance and relevance of statistics, and then see how best we can find a way of integrating it into the national development process, and then have some key performance indicators set for various government departments so that we can have a sustainable funding for statistics and then our NSDS for that matter. Thank you. I'll pause here for now and maybe come back later. Over.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for this very important contributions, a very important contribution where you highlighted the key issues shared by all statistical system in Africa, and also provided some directions and some made some suggestions, particularly you call upon international institutions to help to have a collective resource mobilization strategy. That's very important. I see that Christophe is back, and then as we are talking about the financing, maybe I see that the slide here is about the strategy they put in place to mobilize resources for the NSDS. Christophe, you have 2 minutes maximum to finish your presentation, please.
Okay, thank you, Leon. Exactly, I'm near the end, and by the end of my presentation. Here about the financing of the statistical operation resulting of for the evaluation of the performance of administration. I say this is a new organization. Activities for 2020 are on the way. The performance indicator of administration are grouped in a map of performance monitoring indicator of the Mistral program. Subsequently, these indicators are grouped into statistical operation. A new statistical operation is nothing more than a list of a coherent indicator. These statistical operations are recorded in statistical program, the statistical program of the NSDS, and include in the administration annual budget. In short, the indicator whose user is identified is at the center of the statistical production. Thirdly, financing of statistical financing of statistical operation for monitoring and evaluation of project and program financed by the TFPs. This is a sort in the signing of the memorandum of understanding between the NSO and the UN system to bring together the needs of partners in terms of indicator in a single document with annual updates. Rely on the monitoring and evaluation component of partner funds program and project to mobilize results that be used to this aim. Concerning the last point, who is the producer and the TFP workshop to have the last document of to finance the NSDS, it will be much more to exchange on. It will be much more to extend on the return on investment on statistical activities, pooling of external support and internal resources for financing of statistical activities, the funding statistical for strategic for statistics, and the NSD financing plan, the advocacy plan for mobilizing and securing resources. At the end, we have some other activities. We are supposed to, we're going to follow these activities before the end of this year. The producer and the TPF workshop with technical support for PARIS21, adoption of the NSDS 30, financing by the for financing plan by the National Statistical Council. Thank you very much for your kind attention, Leon. It is
thank you, Christophe. Because of the technology, you made your presentation in 2 phases, and then the second phase arrived at the moment where we were talking about this financing of statistics. And in your presentation, you highlighted something that's very important. Maybe we will see how it works in Cameroon. It can be also useful to see for other countries to see how it works. Maybe it can help also to mobilize resources. I'm underlining here the strategy you put in place for big surveys, where you explain that it's now the responsibility of the ministry to provide, to look for resources for those surveys. For instance, JHS, demographic and health surveys, is not more NSO that is going to do resource mobilization for that, but it's the Ministry of Health. The Ministry of Health that's going to make because it's now under their responsibility in terms of in their budget, so they will mobilize money, and then the NSO and other partners will now implement the surveys. So that's what I understand from one of the strategies you put in place. We are going to see how it works in Cameroon, and then we hope that it can help mobilizing resources. So I saw 2 hands raised before from Austin and Cedric. So Austin, please, you have the floor. In the meantime, Christophe, can you stop sharing your presentation? Austin, you have the floor.
Yes, I'm talking already. Very much, the moderator, and thank you, my friend from Cameroon. You know, he is my very good friend, and we know where we normally meet. So thank you very much for this presentation. Much has been spoken about financing model, for SDS. I don't want to. I don't want to dwell so much on that, because I discovered that these are case different in countries. The financing option of, especially for big survey, discovered that development partners like EU, UN, World Bank, and all the rest, they are so much involved in big surveys, at least for the case of Nigeria. So, but the area I wanted to find out how you are dealing with it in your strategy in Cameroon is the issue of private sector. You discover that you have a lot of data, which data domicile with private sector. Even right from my experience here in Nigeria, yes, we have the act based on the latest strategy we are implementing, which runs from 2017 to 2021. And we are even in the process of developing a new strategy. Now we have the law is there that the statistical office has all the powers to collect all available data in all facets of human endeavor in Nigeria. Now, the most difficult thing is that the private sector, you still see a lot of recursive transit, a lot of objections, a lot of non-cooperation from the private sector. Even though in our national statistical system, in our national statistical plan, we have so much integrated them in it. But you still see a lot of rejection, non-cooperation, non-involvement, withdrawal from the private sector. So it will interest me to know from the perspective of Cameroon, how you have been able to deal with the issue of private sector and all their problems associated with private sector, given the fact that there's a lot of gap, there's a lot of heavy data domiciled with the private sector with respect to statistics. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. We are running out of time, so I will ask Cedric if he has a question or comment to I'll give him only 1 minute because we have to close to end this meeting in 5 minutes.
Okay, can I go?
Yes, please.
Yes, I just wanted to share a lesson from what we have learned, linking a subject that Emmanuel raised while he was talking, related to recognition of statistics. So this lesson could be helpful to mobilize, I think, many more public resources to finance statistical activities. So we had an effective move towards result-based management in implementing public policies. So within this framework, statistics does not come first, but the development objectives. So since people in charge of implementing those public policies encounter many difficulties in monitoring the objective, they just turn to statistics. So within this context, statistics has naturally its relevance. So now we shift the vision toward these frameworks, not by presenting statistics first, but by presenting statistics as an effective way to monitor and assess public policies. So now we are working closely with the administration in charge of the planification at the national level. And then we think that they are more sensitive to statistics, and they can take, yes, then they can take our requests higher. So we have many expectations from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Cedric. I see Nora who says maybe you can take the floor maybe for 2 minutes, Nora, before we close this session.
Yes. Do you want me to come in?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I will just re-echo what I've just written. I would like to appreciate the sessions that have been made so far, but I just wanted to bring out something that stands out from the experience that I've had with the countries that I supported, which I think different stakeholders or participants need to observe when they are designing their strategic plans. One key thing that has been affecting the processes of design and implementation is the lack of leadership at the national, at the NSO, MDA and local government level throughout the processes. Once they are not part of the processes, then it becomes difficult for them to move systematically throughout in the design process. There's also need for advocacy pre to the design, during the design and post-design of the NSDS so that everyone is on board. Again, this is consistent with what Philip presented earlier, but most of the time the tools are not there, the design teams are left on their own, and the leadership does not come in strongly. So the tools must be developed prior to the design process by the team, which must be trained to be able to prepare itself. The other thing is the need for inclusiveness in the NS design beyond the national statistics offices. Why? Because the NSOs produce about 40% of government priority indicators, and the 60% comes from other producers, other sources in MDAs and other national, other CSOs and NGOs, for example. So it is important that inclusiveness during the stakeholder analysis is done thoroughly well to make sure no one is left behind, no indicator is not addressed. Because some of the information can come from surveys, but most of the information does not come through surveys and censuses. So inclusiveness is critical. And then also it's important, there's also been poor determination and mapping of national indicators to the census and survey programs. And when we are designing, usually the data production component doesn't get a lot of attention. But this is where I think a lot of emphasis needs to be put. If you are looking at the user needs, what does government need? Again, like Philip indicated, then you map out what should be the priorities over the period and then develop the strategies for producing either methodology improvement or other areas of quality assurance. Then weak monitoring indicators in the results framework. I've had areas where I have participated in evaluations of NSDSs, but it becomes very hard to track progress because the indicators that were developed during the design for the results framework cannot be actually measured. And so it is important to have clear milestones, measurable or smart indicators, if you like. Besides that, poor documentation. They have monitored, there's no report. They have evaluated, there's no report. Data has been produced, but there's no report. Quality assurance done, no report. Documentation is one of those areas that is killing most of the processes of statistical development, and especially during the NSDS must be emphasized throughout all the stages, including during implementation. Of course, limited resourcing is another key area. Once you don't resource the design team, train them and give them time off to concentrate on the design, it compromises the process and the product. I want to stop here. The rest can come in another day. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Nora. Now we are running out of time. I know that there's a question from Nigeria to Cameroon about how they deal with the private sectors. Let us liaise with Cameroon so that we send you the answer to that question in written. So let us stop here. We were supposed to stop at this year. You were supposed to finish the meeting at 3. Now it's 3:25. So I know that some of you have also other commitments, so we have to stop here now. Let me give back the floor to Philip for the closing. Thank you.
Mr. Leand.
Yes.
Can I answer the question?
Can you do it in 15 seconds?
Yes, yes.
Okay, please.
Less than 50 seconds.
Yes, please.
Taking into account the private sector at the moment, our key users are government and partners only. then
Okay.
not private sector.
So you haven't yet engaged with the private sector, sir.
Not yet.
So this is the answer. Okay,
Yes.
thank you so much, Christophe.
Thank you.
It was a very short answer. Thank you, and thank you to all of you for participating here. Philippe, you have the floor.
Bon, c'est fini.
Thank you very much.
Encore quelques minutes, merci.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leandre. I would like to thank all our colleagues and recognize the quality of the presentations that have been provided and very good discussions and recommendations. Just to emphasize that the NSDS design and implementation requires commitment, ownership, and leadership, and engagement of all stakeholders, as this has been highlighted. Also, thanking Cameroon and Uganda for their contribution. We learned a lot of things in a practical way, and also Nora sharing the experience supporting countries and her previous experience being a coordinator of the NSDS in UBOS. I think this is very, very key, and we will continue to discuss this bilaterally probably, and where the countries will be implementing their or designing or implementing their NSDSs. So thank you very, very much. Tomorrow we will have another session. We be focused on tools. We will have the ADAPT. We will also have the statistical capacity monitor, and we will touch upon the geospatial data integration. So please do connect 10 minutes earlier so that we have enough time to go through all those presentations. And actually, I want just to say that we have 3 hours for every day for the training. We thought that 4 hours is very much for a training online. Maybe we have a chance to have a whole day, 4 days, whole day training face-to-face, hopefully by next year. So thank you very much. And I'm just inviting you to connect tomorrow, 10 minutes before, and use the same link. We will probably send a reminder tomorrow morning for those who can't retrieve the connection. So thank you very much. Thank you, Leandre, for the very good moderation for today, and see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.